U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday wrapped up a high-stakes meeting in Anchorage in the U.S. state of Alaska, with progress made but no deal reached. The summit marked the very first high-level U.S.-Russia meeting since 2021. And analysts say that for Trump, the meeting represented an opportunity to advance American economic interests, while for Putin, it meant returning to the global diplomatic stage. Ukraine, meanwhile, was sidelined in negotiations, which has since sparked deep concerns among its EU citizens about their interests being overlooked, as well as Europe's diminishing influence in global geopolitics. No progress was made towards ending Russia's invasion. SABC News correspondent Nick Harper joins us now live from Washington, D.C. with the very latest. Nick, a very good afternoon to you. So in a major shift, Trump says Ukraine now needs to make a deal. This after his summit with Russia's President Putin ended without a ceasefire. But how have these news been received? Any reaction from the Zelensky camp so far?
Well, plenty of reaction here in the United States, globally as well. President Zelensky put out a carefully worded statement during the course of this morning in which he seemed to be agreeing with many of the things that Donald Trump had said, including accepting that invitation here to the White House, which we're led to believe will take place on Monday afternoon. The possibility for Donald Trump and President Zelensky to meet again just a few months after they met in the Oval Office. That meeting, of course, ended in disaster. We saw President Zelensky get into a furious row with Donald Trump and several other Trump administration advisors. The meeting was ended early, the Ukrainian delegation effectively thrown out of the White House. The hope is that Monday's upcoming meeting will be somewhat calmer. There's also the possibility that European leaders will be there as well. We understand that some have been invited. No response from them yet. We don't know whether they will be here, and if so, how many of them will be in attendance. But I think one thing to note that Donald Trump has changed his opinion on is what happens next. Up until now, he has been aligning himself with Ukraine and Kyiv's desire for an immediate ceasefire. He put out on social media, though, overnight following that meeting with President Putin, that he doesn't believe a ceasefire is now the best way forward. Rather, he feels a more substantial peace agreement is required. And of course, that has been something that President Putin has been asking for up until now. So the US president shifting his alliance, it would seem, in terms of what he wants. Of course, from Kyiv's point of view, the worry is that by not having a truce and instead aiming for a peace agreement, which would take longer to agree, the fighting and the bloodshed will continue. And that's why Ukraine has been asking for a ceasefire to take place immediately, while behind the scenes they work towards that peace agreement.
This is exactly, as you've just said, what Ukraine and its European allies had been demanding. In fact, these allies have since vowed to back Ukraine and further tighten sanctions on Russia now, making a very precarious situation, of course, since they've also urged the United States to actually offer security guarantees to of course, Ukraine. So what happens now, as well as after that meeting between the two leaders come Monday?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to note that Donald Trump spoke about Friday's meeting with President Putin as having made great progress, but without saying exactly what that progress was. Also writing on social media, it was a great and very successful day. There was that desire for security guarantees for Ukraine. It's not really any much clearer as to whether or not that had been agreed to, and that potentially could be something that is hashed out during Monday's meeting, because Donald Trump seems to be changing his approach to all of this, what he wants and how he wants it done. But he is hoping to get what he would consider a win out of all of this. He is hoping to be able to create a three-way meeting between President Zelensky himself and President Putin. At this stage, President Zelensky is also very keen on that happening, but we haven't heard from the Kremlin whether or not it will go ahead. Donald Trump writing on social media, if things work out in Monday's meeting, then he would aim to schedule a meeting with President Putin as well. And from Trump's point of view, the desire is that the two other leaders then work out exactly what happens to captured territory, how that gets divided up. Donald Trump, going into the Anchorage meeting, said he was not there to negotiate on behalf of Ukraine. Really, he was there as the broker, the middleman, to try and arrange this three-way meeting. But at this stage, despite the Trump-Putin meeting and now the Monday Trump-Zelensky meeting, there is no word, no definite word that we will say a three-way meeting coming out of all of this.
And Nick, Trump has already told news that, of course, he and Putin had already discussed those land transfers as well as some of those security assurances. I mean, the general consensus here, Nick, is that Mr. Putin is the one that actually scored wins before and after his engagement with President Trump.
I didn't quite catch the question there, but I think the point of what you were trying to get at is what happens to the territory next. And there is this suggestion that potentially President Putin might look to drop some of his claims if he is able to get the majority of the Donetsk region. There is vast amounts of territory that has been captured during the course of this 3.5-year conflict. And let's not forget, there's also Crimea that was annexed by Russia back in 2014. It is a question of, from a Russian point of view, how much they hang on to and how much Ukraine wants returned to it. Ukraine has said that's very much a red line for them. But President Putin, listening to his comments that he made during that press conference yesterday, he still continued to speak about the root causes of this conflict. And if we think back 3.5 years, he described the root causes as trying to eradicate Nazism from Ukraine. So really no suggestion from the Russian president that he's ready to end the conflict, that he feels he's achieved that root cause objective. So whether or not the three men get around the table, whether or not they manage to discuss how to divide up territory, there still seems to be this thing at the back of President Putin's mind that might make him feel that he hasn't achieved his objectives and therefore desires to keep on fighting in Ukraine.
Nick, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for that comprehensive update. Nick Harper, SABC News correspondent, joining us live from Washington, D.C. with the very latest, of course, between Trump and, of course, Russian President, of course, Mr. Putin.